It sure was.
This is Geek Gab with your host, Daddy Warpig, along with my co-hosts, Brian, Niemeier, and Dorrinal. We are back. That's right, Geek Gab, once a week, the best geek talk in the business, which I can't imagine is very large. And as is my usual want, so welcome to everybody who's listened to before, welcome to everybody who's listening now, and welcome to everyone who will no doubt be listening in the future. We, as is my usual want at this point in the show, I take a quick pause and allow my co-hosts to get a word in edgewise. How are you guys doing tonight?
Doing fantastic, Daddy Warpig. My shares of Geek and Gab are both up 15% since we started the Geek Gab up again. How about you, Brian? How you doing?
Oh, I've been as busy as an author editing an epic fantasy book can be, but I'm glad for this respite, this eye in the storm of my hectic week to sit down and talk with you guys and our listeners about geekish things.
So how is work proceeding? Is work proceeding on your book at a pace you would like?
Oh, it's never at a pace I would like, because, again, as an outliner, I was at the point of, I just want to get this thing done a couple of years ago. So, no, but it's proceeding at an acceptable pace. I'm probably knocking out, like, 2,000 words a night.
That's a good pace. That's a good clip. 2,000 words a night. Well, not for epic fantasy. I guess it depends on your definition of a good clip. But 200,000 word novel, and most of your Jordan novels clock in at like 300K.
Yeah.
For 200,000
the first version of this did. Sorry, go ahead.
That's a big book. They call those door stoppers, and apparently they are only beloved in America, and the rest of the world simply puts up with them because they have to. Your Stephen King-esque books, the rest of the world puts up with because they love Stephen King, but they hate books that size and they want them published much, much smaller.
Yeah, so do I. That's why I narrowed it down to about a third its original length, because it's the sequel to Ethereal, my first book. It started out like 3 times longer. Now it's actually shorter, and it's probably going to come in like somewhere between 1,500 pages shorter than the first one. So I should correct myself. It's not just straight epic fantasy. It's still science fantasy, but the part I'm at, the fantasy aspect, is very much coming to the fore.
Did you add the chapter on MILF Phi?
Oh, you wanted me to add a chapter on that? I gave you a snippet.
I think you drastically increase your reader base the more MILF action that was in it.
I'll take that under advisement. But you still owe me like 1/10 of a cent for the for-hire work I did for you on Twitter, so just put that in your tab.
All right, I'll make a deal with you. You keep this stuff coming. I'm gonna do this. All right. I still haven't read Ethereal, but I plan to. I'm gonna saunter over to Amazon and I'm gonna skip the guy trying to sell it for $92. I'm gonna buy your book Ethereal, right? I'm gonna get that paperback, and I'll ask you in a second. I'll ask you in a second how much, what percentage of that you see as opposed to the book. But I'm gonna take that paperback and I'm gonna read it. And whether I love it or I hate it, I'm gonna bring it down to the Redmond Library and I'm gonna donate it so everybody else can take it out and read it. How's that sound?
That sounds fantastic, sir. Thank you very much. That'll be the 3rd library it's in now. That's awesome.
We're going to make it happen.
Okay. Yeah, and for those who are wondering, yes, Dorrinal's correct. I was very surprised the other day to log into Amazon and see that someone is selling a used copy of the trade paperback of Ethereal for like $90.
I didn't know there was a trade paperback copy.
Really? Yeah.
I did not know that.
Yeah, it's in the tweet that's pinned to the top of my feed, and there's a link on the upper left side of my website if you go there. Apparently I need to increase its visibility. But,
all right, well, you can Ethereal available in both ebook and paperback book. I guess it's my turn to give an update about...
I was very surprised the other day to log into Amazon and see that someone is selling...
I guess it's my turn to give an update to my particular book, an epic reality novel, an epic nonfiction novel, the tale of my involvement in the geek movement known as Gamergate. And as it is not surprising to me, but I got sick last Saturday, which is why week's show was so scattered in places, and have remained sick until today. I've not been able to actually write anything. I haven't added a single word whatsoever to the book. However, I have reorganized things, moved some things around, taken notes about things I want to write about, and generally kept busy trying to, and done a few small line edits here and there, correcting typos, things like that, and generally kept busy on the book, but just not being able to actually produce, which is sad, but not surprising to me, given the state of things. So that's why I haven't been tweeting out updates, word count updates, because I don't have any word count updates. So that is my disappointing but completely unsurprising update as far as what's going on with AKA Daddy Warpig, which is the current working title.
I like it.
I like it too.
So, today we were discussing before we went live about what to talk about, and I think we finally... It's kind of interesting because we were going to talk about Skin Game, and we've had a couple weeks' notice, but none of us have reread Skin Game since we decided to talk about it, so we're all going off of memories from back when it came out, which I think is, 6 months ago? No, it had to have been in 2014, so almost a year ago now.
I'm a bit more... Sorry, go ahead.
I was just saying, yeah.
He was responding in the affirmative to my fumbling memory of when Skin Game was released.
No, I mean, I've read it a bit more recently, but I've only read the excerpt that was in the Tor packet. Or, sorry, the Hugo packet. It's not from Tor, I think it's from Penguin. Oh.
So let's back up real quick. What the heck is Skin Game? Who's it by? What's it about? And I think I'll let John take this one, because I think he would be most excited to give the introduction.
Skin Game is the... Thank you, Daddy Warpig. The most recent entry in Jim Butcher's Dresden Files series. This is a series of books that we've been talking about a lot here on the Gab. It's one of our favorites. It is an urban fantasy series that is... urban fantasy might have a lot of different connotations, but this is definitely more on the action-adventure side and less on the romance side. For those of you Laurel K. Hamilton fans who just got all excited, this is not that.
It's not paranormal romance.
Right. What this is the book is about a character, Harry Dresden, who is listed in the Yellow Pages as the only wizard private investigator in Chicago. That should tell you everything you need to know about the setting. It follows the adventures and misadventures of Harry Dresden as he works to save his city and his friends and the world from unimaginable evil that tends to be hidden from the rest of the normal world. Being a wizard, he has all the powers, knowledge, and connections necessary to do that. It's a great series. It's fun to read. It's very fast-paced, action-based, and the main character, Harry Dresden, is a lot of fun to get along with. It's simply enjoyable to read.
You know what? I just realized I might actually have read a book in the series that you haven't read. Because I recently, he has written 3 short stories dealing with Harry Dresden's dealings with Sasquatch, the Bigfoot. And they combined those 3 stories in one volume, and they're selling that volume for some unimaginably high price, which I went ahead and ponied up and paid for because it had been almost a year since I got my Dresden Files fix. So I just bought it.
What were you thinking? Aren't fans great?
Oh yeah, see, those are the kinds of people you want to you want to end up with is fans who are willing to do with virtually no thought at all about the price margins of what they are paying for, knowing full well they are paying probably too much, are nevertheless willing to slap the money down to buy a bunch of bits and bytes just to be able to read some more in your fantasy series. And I'll confess, Butcher has said that he makes more money per book off of his epic fantasy stuff, and I've heard other writers say so, and it boggles my mind because I did not think that. I'm trying to get out of this now that I've talked myself into a corner. I think that his writing and the stories and setting of the Dresden Files are far more interesting than what happened in the
Codex Alera.
Yeah, the Codex Alera books. Not that the Codex Alera books are bad. I'm not trying to talk those down. I mean, Jim Butcher on a bad day is better than 99% of the writers out there. And this will tell you how good Jim Butcher is that the best writer I know of in the English language, who is Jim Wright, John Wright, John C. Wright. Jim Wright is a different person, and we're not going to talk about him this week. John C. Wright is a fan of the Dresden Files and talks about how well written they are and how brilliant they are, as is his wife, as is the other writers who were in on the podcast I was doing with them. So yeah, he is well regarded among a lot of people. Larry Correia, who writes a ton of great books, is a big Jim Butcher fan. So if you haven't read any of the Dresden Files books, by all means, I encourage you to pick up the Dresden Files books. I also encourage you to pick up Codex Alera if you're into epic fantasy. I just prefer the Dresden Files. That's my opinion.
Yeah, I gave a few of them Codex Alera books, or at least the first one I read. Thought it was good. He's a good writer. Obviously, he knows how to do the fantasy thing. It wasn't the same for me.
And as Wolfman in the chat points out, his vampires absolutely do not sparkle. That's not quite true, is it? That's not quite true. The White Court vampires, when they are extremely taken by the hunger, don't they tend to shine? Don't they tend to glow? It's not sparkly, but it is glowy. They tend to glow white. Am I wrong? Am I misremembering that?
I don't think so. That sounds like that's what happens. And you know what? Knowing Jim Butcher and the way he writes, that is almost certainly a deliberate reference.
Oh, totally.
He is very, very keyed into geek culture, and I think, have we told the Jim Butcher stories that, like, now that he's a millionaire, bajillionaire, what he spent his money on is walling off a section of forest and changing it around so it makes great LARPing territory for him and his friends to go out LARPing in, and he built a big game room in his basement for his friends to come over and play role-playing games. He just...
Anybody familiar, anybody our generation who grew up on D&D and White Wolf and stuff knows, from the first book of the Dresden Files, that this guy has played way too much Vampire the Masquerade. It comes through.
Well, it's really inspiring about that, him giving back to the community that I'm sure informed his career. Have you gentlemen heard about how Jim Butcher got started with writing? He just clawed and scraped his way into a career. I mean, it's...
Go on.
Yeah, but by all means, we have the time.
Sure. All right, well, if I remember correctly, he had started out, and I think that the first book he wrote was like a paranormal sci-fi thriller, which he basically admitted was a ripoff of the X-Files.
Okay.
Yeah, and by his own admission, it was horrible. I mean, he slaved over the thing, took a look at it, and yeah, even by his own taste, it was awful. So he had a friend who said, well, why don't you join a writer's group? So he did, and he figured out a trick where he would basically steal the other members of the writers' groups, not ideas, but their techniques. Right? So he would hurry and get his weekly submission for the writers group done, and then he would just sit there and pay very close attention to what everybody else was reading and everybody else's comments, and would slowly use it to improve his own work. And this took him years. And he would get back on the wagon, write another book. It would be horrible. He'd write another one. It would be horrible. Would totally bomb with the writers group. This whole time he was taking creative writing classes at community college and learning all he could from his peers. And then finally, I believe what ended up being the first Dresden book started as a short story exercise in either his class or his writing group. And he'd really just kind of done it as a lark. Actually, I believe he went back to like that early X-Files ripoff, but bringing to it what he'd learned, and this goes to show the wisdom and the truth that, if you write a book and you don't think it's up to snuff, well, put it in a drawer for a few months, a few years, come back and look at it with fresh eyes. And boy, when Jim did that, people told him, you've got something here. If you could flesh this short story out into a novel, then this could be really good. And he did, and it still sucked. So he went through many more revisions. He tried getting, he tried every agent in the book. No one would sign him. Finally, he heard about a contest where a group of high-powered New York agents were having a luncheon, and a couple of lucky writers who won this contest would get to have lunch with them and pitch to them. Well, Jim looked at the rules and found, this isn't fair. So he crashed it. I mean, he literally walked into the restaurant, walked over the velvet rope, sat down at the table like, "Hi, I'm Jim Butcher." And that was how he got his first agent.
Wow.
From what I remember, he actually had the four of the first Dresden Files books written before he got a contract to print any of them.
Yeah.
Which is why they all came out as closely together as they did.
Yes, okay. I believe that's true.
So yeah, having gumption might work out for you. On the other hand, it might blow up in your face. So just keep that in mind. If you're looking for a writing career, having gumption can work out. It can also get you, blackballed for life. So
it can. Okay, go ahead. Dorrinal?
Yeah.
Okay.
So what did you think of the first couple hundred pages of the new one?
I loved it.
Okay, so you haven't read any of it before. You're coming to it brand new. Were you lost? Were you confused?
Not at all. So yes, this is the first Dresden Files material I've ever read. I saw an episode of the TV show back in the day, but I'm told that does not count at all, so I'm willing to discount that. But no, I was never lost.
Does not count.
Right. Yeah, I was never lost, not for a second. As soon as a character came on the page, within a couple paragraphs, I knew what his deal was, what his motivations were. General
Isn't it nice to have characters who have actual personality and motivations?
Yes. These are not sock puppets that Jim is writing. They're fully fleshed out individuals.
I've got a whole rant about the Dresden Files book, or Dresden Files TV series, which I don't think I'm going to do because most of it revolves around how offensive I found the casting of the major Hispanic love interest, where I'm going to do it. They cast an Aryan, blonde, blue-eyed woman as a Hispanic character. And the reason why that irks me is because I watch Supernatural, and someone who casts for Supernatural has a fetish for Mediterranean or Hispanic women with striking dark eyes, dark hair, darker toned skin. And so, no. There's like 10 seasons of Supernatural, 200 episodes. Almost every single episode features at least one actress, and they're all different actresses who match that description. So I know there are literally hundreds of women they could have cast in that role, but they cast the one Aryan, and it irritated me. Not that I'm a big, not that I get offended easily with things like that. I just thought, why would you go out of your way to make something that didn't fit with the books when it's that easy to make it fit with the books. It just irritated me. Okay, that's the end of my rant. I cut it all short because we were talking about Skin Game.
Okay.
I'm just letting that negativity, that Warpig seething negativity wash over me. It feels good. I won't lie.
Let the hate flow through you.
Okay, when Jim Butcher set out to write the Dresden Files series, he initially wrote it as a joke. He said what he wanted to do was put in every single cliche he could think of in one book and write it. And it turned out to actually be brilliant. And because what he did was he took every single cliche of the Private Investigator series, Philip Marlowe, and all of those others going back for 100 years, hard-boiled detective books that later got turned into film noir movies. And then he took a bunch of different cliches of wizards and fantasy and shoved them all in a book, and it actually turned out to be brilliant. The first 4 books are a little bit rougher than I think we were mentioning before that Dead Beat is where the series got really, really good. The other books before that are good. They're just not as brilliant as Dead Beat and later. And what he did was then he made another list of monsters. Common monsters that you find in fantasy and things like that, and just put them in the list, and each book has been, okay, this book is about vampires, this book is about zombies, this book is about so on and so forth down the line. And you would think that would turn out to be absolute garbage, but it isn't. It's brilliant.
Because he's an excellent writer. I mean, that's where...
He makes it happen, for sure.
Yeah, that's where Codex Alera came from, which was he was dared to take just the 2 worst concepts someone could come up with and write a good book out of it, because he said he could. And the audience at the panel that happened came up with the Lost Roman Legion and Pokemon.
So Skin Game is a heist novel. It is Ocean's 11 with monsters and wizards in the modern world. Are we allowed to talk about recurring characters? Is that going to spoil things? I checked from the chat here. The people listening have read, a lot of Dresden Files, at least the one that's responding. So, do you want to talk about the characters? Who wants to introduce Nicodemus? Because he's the coolest villain ever.
Let's see. I don't know if I can do him justice. Nicodemus is... Wow, I'd have to give the whole background of all of them and everything.
Okay, I can do that concisely. I'll take that one.
Okay.
Judas Iscariot, who betrayed Jesus Christ and hanged himself in a field, was paid with 30 pieces of silver, 30 denarii, which are Roman coins. These 30 pieces of silver that were paid to Judas Iscariot have been cursed. Specifically, in the Dresden Files universe, each of the pieces of silver is bonded to the soul of a demon, one of the fallen. Human beings who pick up these coins have the demon enter into them, and sometimes it takes them over, and sometimes it doesn't. But always, always, always bad things happen. The Order of the Denarians are theoretically, the 30 people who are being possessed at any moment or working with the demons at any moment, and they are unbelievably tough. Each of them has a different set of powers. Each of them has a different set of motivations. They do not work together as a team, and they very often come into conflict and even set each other up to get killed. Nicodemus is the most powerful of the Denarians, and he is one of the oldest, if not the oldest. He's 1,000 years old, and he has, as part of his coterie, as part of his team, anywhere from, I believe, 5 to 7 of these 30 demons at his beck and call who are willing to team up with him on various things. Nicodemus needs to steal something from the vaults of the Greek god Hades, and in order to carry this out, he strong-arms the person who holds a marker over Harry Dresden's soul. That is the Winter Queen Mab, and she calls on Harry, who is her Winter Knight, and says, "I want you to do this for me," and he says, "Okay," because he has to. And there's a very neat way Mab has of trapping him into it at the beginning that I won't give away, and also I don't exactly remember the details to it. But Mab is devious beyond belief, cunning beyond belief, and she always gets her way no matter how hard it is, how hard you think you're working to avoid it. So that's the main villain. That's the main setup.
And it's set up so well. Because I got the impression that Nicodemus appears in previous books, right?
At least two, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, and I caught all of that just from the 100 pages of Skin Game I read.
He's just as fun. These characters, the Denarians, not just because of the involved backstory and everything, they're the most fun villains in the series. And they also, whenever they show up, you get Harry to interact with the probably my favorite hero aside from Harry, who is Michael.
Everybody loves Michael. He's a fan favorite.
Michael is, or was, he's a paladin. He's a freaking paladin. I'd never seen him bubble hearth, but he does wield, or he did wield at one time a holy magical sword and fought the evil Denarians with it.
Yeah, they have 3 Knights of the Nail, of the 3 nails of that staked Jesus to the cross. They took those 3 nails out and made them into swords, and they have 3 knights who bear those swords to fight the 30 Denarians, which you would think is unfair, but somehow never actually turns out to be the case. Here's the thing, too. Can I go off on a tangent here? Because this is what I think about every time we talk about Michael. What I love about Michael, what I love about when he appears in the books, is how in the Dresden Files universe, Michael doesn't necessarily have a ton of big, bad, showy powers, but fate always conspires to put him where he needs to be, or to ensure that things happen that help him get out of, just barely get out of the situation, in order to do what he needs to do. And I've always thought that that would be a much more interesting way of doing priests and clerics in a role-playing game than the, alternate magic mages that they so often become.
Yeah, he's basically got ad hoc eucatastrophes going on, like Tolkien talked about.
Yeah. The coincidences that underlie so much of Tolkien and so much of Charles Dickens' work.
Well, there's 2 broad ways you can do a wizard in fantasy fiction, okay? You can do the Merlin, Gandalf, it sounds like Mike would fall into this category in Dresden Files, whose powers, there is no magic system laid out for these characters. No one else necessarily understands what they do, but you get from their reputation that these are powerful men, wise men, and they mainly appear as counselors. They're really not allowed to directly solve problems with their magic, because if they could, it would deflate all tension. Okay, so you might get a couple scenes where they come into their own and save off the Balrog, come back from the dead, summon some eagles, something like that, but on the whole, they're mainly there to advise and support the main characters. Then you've got, like you were saying, more the D&D style. I like to call it Sandersonian because of how meticulous and intricate his magic systems are. It's basically an application of Sanderson's first law, which is the more well thought out and coherent your magic system, the more okay it is to solve problems with that magic system.
I would challenge you. I just bought a book last night. It is Larry Niven's. It's called The Time of the Warlock. It is his book, The Magic May Go Away, and the 2 prequel short stories to it. But also included in this book is an essay called Notes for a Series of Stories to be Set in the Fantasy World of Magic Goes Away. It's a really clunky title, but what it is the law of magic in his world, how magic works. And it is brilliant, and it is well thought out, and it is completely different from both of those models that you just gave.
Interesting.
If you're thinking of writing fantasy, or if you're designing a role-playing game with I admit, I have, in the 2 days since I first read it, I have divvied it up into different worlds that I am building right now, and am stealing various pieces for different projects, because they are true, they are present in magic as a folk tale tradition, and it is such a different approach than any of the role-playing or literary-inspired approaches that you just talked about.
Well, if anyone's going to come up with a third way, it's Niven.
Well, I mean, don't forget that the purpose of the magic system in your stories is to serve the narrative, and I think where Jim Butcher really succeeds is that his world works a certain way where faith and beliefs have a real power, real magical power. And so that works in the narrative. It makes it part of the story. On the other hand, magic systems in an RPG system need to provide the players with an interesting experience. They don't need to serve any stupid narrative or anything. You know, they need to have something for the players to work with. You know, they need to be gameable, right?
Yes.
So there's some overlap there, in that you can translate that cool narrative into game mechanics that are fun and interesting to play. But I don't think they're necessarily necessary to each other.
Yeah, and it's really hard to translate from one to another easily. So
Yeah, you have to be really careful. I know that I think it's Steve Erickson, the guy did the what's it called, Malazan books, but he based his epic fantasy series on like a series of GURPS campaigns he ran.
And did it not work well? Was that?
No, it did, but I mean, from what I've heard, I haven't read them yet, but he got it past the publisher, he got them published, and like it only came out later that's what he based it on. But you've just, like Neil says, you've got to be careful.
Yeah.
And a lot of publishers say, don't just send us the raw transcript notes of your last D&D dungeon crawl.
Well, speaking of which, they actually published Dresden Files RPG under the Fate system. Have either of you guys tried that out?
I had tried Fate out. I own both of the original Dresden Files books, and I have not played specifically the Dresden Files, but I was playing the Dresden Files edition of Fate when I was playing Fate.
Yeah, my group is considering trying out Fate, and yeah, the Dresden version received a lot of votes, so we'll probably end up trying it at some point.
Oh, great. I'd love to hear what you guys think of it. It just occurred to me that it's sort of a weird... It almost created a rift in the space-time continuum. A role-playing game about a book series that sounds like it was based on somebody's White Wolf game.
Well, one of my buddies has a saying when he's reading something. He's like, if I can hear the dice rolling in my head, then I know it needs more editing, because it clearly came from the game. Yeah.
Okay, well, I would give a strong endorsement to the Dresden Files series. In addition to the main book series, there's also a Side Jobs, which is an anthology of Dresden Files short stories that have been published in other places, and there's also his new Bigfoot oriented short story, which is an anthology of 3 stories that were published in other places that were all oriented around Bigfoot. And there is set in the world 4 different graphic novels that are canon and are not covered in his mainline novels. They're stories of Dresden. You can buy them as printed graphic novels. They're from, I believe, Dable Brothers, or you can buy them in electronic format, whichever suits your needs. And I have read one of them. Ghoul Goblin, or Ghoul and Goblin, and it was great. I enjoyed it quite a lot. So if you want to see some Dresden Files action in that's illustrated comics, those you can check out. Also, I am sure, although I have not confirmed this, it just occurred to me, there's a good chance he has various short stories which will appear only in Audible, because Audible Books does that quite a lot.
Have you guys heard about one of the best Jim Butcher projects, or one of the best sounding? It's supposed to be coming down the pipe soon.
Assume we haven't, and tell the audience.
Great. I was hoping you'd say that. Yeah, Larry Correia is going to be doing a Monster Hunter International anthology soon. I believe sometime next year. And one of the authors that he got to write a story for it was Jim Butcher.
Who is bringing Harry Dresden into the world of Monster Hunter International.
Oh, I hadn't heard that.
Yes, it's a Harry Dresden story.
Oh, get out.
Yep.
It's a crossover.
Harry Dresden meets Owen Pitt. Owen Zastava Pitt.
You just made it even better somehow.
I pay attention to these things. My ears perk up whenever those two worlds show up.
Oh, God bless you.
All right, we are way out of time. Like 7-8 minutes over our limit here. I'll give everybody else a chance to say goodbye before we sign off.
Hey, good night, everybody. Thanks for listening in. And read them Dresden Files.
Agreed. Thanks for listening. High recommend from each of us on Skin Game at least. I can't recommend the rest because I haven't read them, but we're going to remedy that soon.
All right. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. This is Geek Gab with your hosts, Dorrinal, Brian Niemeier, and me, Daddy Warpig, broadcasting once a week at irregular times. So watch my Twitter feed for updated information. Thanks for tuning in, and we will be back.